Hi, and welcome to my channel, Take Control of Your Health. I'm Dr. Cori Stern, and I am so excited today to have a guest with us, Dr. J, who has a PhD in biochemistry and his own YouTube channel, which he'll mention. And today we're going to talk about the very important topic of plastic and how it is poisoning you and how serious a problem this is. So Dr. J, let's tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing your own channel.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a PhD in biochemistry from Boston University Medical School, and I did the PhD on the topic of sex hormones and cholesterol. And as I was doing that research, I was realizing there's BPA all around us, right? And this was before BPA was even a big problem. There wasn't labels on the foods or on the water bottles that said BPA free, but it was clearly a health hazard. Um, but it's just BPA. And then I also realized though that there's other versions of BPA that are just as problematic as BPA, and nobody was paying attention to those. BPS would be a good example, or BPF, or whatever letter. You can tack on all kinds of different letters and find the same problems, and it still causes health issues, and it's still plastic, and it's still BPA free. But I just basically started recognizing through my own research that there's this whole list of chemicals. Phthalates are another one that we're going to talk about, but there's parabens, there's oxybenzones and sunscreens, on and on and on. Even soy, for example. These chemicals are all problematic for people. Some of the plant chemicals in the soy, uh, some of these pesticides, and they were all they had a common theme, and the theme was they acted like estrogen in your body, or they disrupted your natural hormones, especially testosterone.
Yep, yeah. I've mentioned all of those things, various
hmm
videos. So, and actually the way I found you was listening to your cholesterol video, which is
Oh,
a topic I've addressed several times. So
yeah, it's a big problem.
it
I mean, it's
is.
probably it's a number one piece of nonsense that you get from modern doctors when you go to them. They want to check your cholesterol, they love to complain about your cholesterol, and they want to put you on statins. It's pretty much everybody, and it's all nonsense. I mean, 90%. There's always the one person with legitimately like a genetic issue and they have legitimately high cholesterol, but man, that's super rare, and it's unbelievable, that issue.
I know. I did a whole breakdown on that and
hmm
talked about what, the truth behind it. And I have many people that have reached out for help with it. So that's why we do this, right? To try to help people
Yeah, for sure.
stay healthy. Yeah. So
Well,
let's talk about this widespread problem with chemicals like BPA, which is part of plastic, and how do people get exposure to it? And
mhm.
what are the health ramifications?
Yeah, so they did a study once on children's daycare facilities, and they found even in the air quality, all they did is check the air and just think like plastic everywhere, right? Like think plastic flooring, plastic slides, plastic toys, plastic.
Mm,
They found even the air quality was a risk for cancer because the levels of phthalates were so high in the air. So if you put enough plastics in your environment, you can have a problem just breathing,
mhm.
which can lead to all kinds of dysfunction. And again, it's mostly hormone dysfunction. But I mean, most people aren't that, like they're not basically living a life that's just surrounded by that much plastic, hopefully. And if they are, they need to fix it. But um, most of the time, it's the drinking water. People store their water in plastic. Even at room temperature, I consider that a problem. Certainly, if you heat it up, you get a lot more leaching, and it's a much bigger problem. But that doesn't mean room temperature is fine. So you don't want to store your water in plastic. Sure, if you have a plastic pitcher and the water's in plastic for a few seconds, whatever, and you pour it out into glass, no big deal. But if you're sitting in it at room temperature for long stretches, you're going to get leaching of these plastic chemicals. So the drinking water is a big one. People have to filter it because, of course, most of our pipes are plastic. There's plastic everywhere. And so you filter drinking water, don't store it in plastic. Very simple. the other thing is the personal care products, unfortunately, have a lot of plastic chemicals, and the companies use them because they're cheap. They're just made from petroleum. So they pretend like there's some kind of value to these chemicals, but really they're just trying to make more money, and it has nothing to do with value. It's actually just harmful, if anything, to your health. And the real challenge here on this overall topic is conventional scientists, scientists that are just doing normal research, trying to work with the government to make guidelines or whatever. They do these toxicity studies and they measure toxicity. So they're looking at cells and they're putting BPA on the cells and they're trying to see how much does it take to kill the cells. That's toxicity. Problem is BPA looks like estrogen. You know, they used to study in the 1920s, they did research on BPA as birth control. They literally studied it for birth control. And they found that it was effective, but it was better. It made them more money as plastic, more financial incentive to make it into plastic. But what happens when you put birth control or these fake plastic chemicals on cells? They don't kill the cells. You know, so like the scientists will say, "Oh, look at that, they're not toxic, they're just fine," right?
Right.
Meanwhile, they're destroying your sex hormone
They're
levels,
trying turning boys into girls.
feminizing people,
Yeah.
which some scientists are honest about, and they're even using the word feminization if you look at the studies. But most of them are pretending like it's not happening because they don't want to get into the politics, so they just avoid that topic. But it's a real thing for sure. And then it's making people gain weight, you know, because these chemicals trigger weight gains. It's causing depression even. So there's a whole list of health issues. Meanwhile, it's not toxic supposedly. So clearly it's toxic, but it's not traditionally toxic. It's not defined as toxic by classically trained scientists, and that's a huge problem because it's confusing a lot of people.
Great point. And the problem with chemicals is not always just toxicity. When there are many chemicals that are hormone disruptors, and so your cholesterol is made out of hormones. So it causes a problem with the quality of your cholesterol. And then vitamin D even is molecularly more like a hormone than.
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like it's one thing. People are like, well, what do these chemicals do? Well, it's not just one thing, it's a whole list of things. And I bring this out in the book. I wrote a book on this topic. It's called Estrogeneration. Like we're exposed to these estrogens, it's generational, it's being passed on to our kids. The effects are. But you know, obviously in the book I go into crazy amounts of detail on this, and it's not that technical. It's just the details are important and the studies are important. But one of the things that's interesting and that I highlight in there is you've got estrogen receptors in your whole body. You know, so like your skin is affected, your eyesight's affected, your brain is affected, your muscle function, of course, is affected. Testosterone and estrogen. It's not like you just have these things in one organ. It's not like insulin where it's, you know, very specific to your muscles or your fat cells, but it's not like leptin where it's just in your brain. Some hormones are just acting on certain organs. Sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, they're acting throughout your whole body. So when you disrupt these things, sure enough, you find problems in your whole body. So it's hard to pin down because you're causing so many problems. And the other reason it's hard to pin down is everybody is exposed to plastic. So unfortunately, it's hard to do a study. They literally had to go to Alaska, to northern Alaska, to find like a tribe of people that weren't just constantly exposed to plastic to compare them. But then they're like eating a totally different diet and their exercise different. So then people
Right.
say, well, how can you really compare? And that's a good point. It's hard to compare because it's hard to find a control group of people when you're doing a study that doesn't have plastic in their system just to the gills.
I've heard that there's even microplastic particles in sea salt.
Hmm.
It's hard to
Yeah.
find a good clean salt now, even when you're trying to get the best quality salt of. I don't even know
I
how to.
use I use ancient seabeds, right? So like if it's from Himalaya or some like ancient bed that's no longer attached to the actual ocean, there was no pollution 100,000 years ago or however many, uh, those salts are great. So another example, in Utah, they've got a bunch of ancient seedbeds. So there's a company called Redmond, Redmon, Redmond Real Salt. They've got cheap salt,
Heard
like
of them.
relatively
Yeah,
inexpensive. Yeah, and it's not polluted.
that's really good to know. So we'll put a link to that in the description and also to your book. I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
even know you had a book.
Oh yeah. It's been out for a while, but it's still like doing really well because all the information in there is super relevant. It's just as relevant as it has always been. And like for example, when I wrote my book, they were just realizing these companies were being subversive with BPA because they were saying BPA free, but then they were putting BPS in there and BPS was just as bad. That was just when I wrote the book. And I basically, one of the big accomplishments of that book was it brought that to light. It basically became like a mainstream, well-known thing if you're paying attention. Now most people aren't paying attention, so most people still don't know that even many years later. But it's that at least brought it to the forefront of people doing podcasts and leaders like yourself that actually have YouTube channels and talk about these things. So um, yeah, there's a lot of information in there. It's not just plastics; it goes beyond that.
That's wonderful. And I thank you so much for writing that book. I know it's a big project to write a book. I
Yeah.
intend to do it someday, but well,
Hmm.
we'll get back to that another time. But so yeah, so in practice, I see so many people, males and females, with hormonal issues, and people will come in self-diagnosing themselves like, I have a hormonal imbalance. They don't know
Hmm.
why, they don't, understand it. They just, I guess, feel hormonal.
Hmm.
And then we see also children, we see quite a few young men, young boys with gynecomastia, which is when a boy or a man develops breast tissue or overdevelops breast tissue.
Hmm.
And with what I do, the way that I work with people, I'm actually able to detect using I use a what's called a muscle testing technique. I'm able to actually see if plastic is showing up,
Hmm.
and detox them. So
Hmm.
that always ends up being the first step is identifying the source. And yes, very often it is water bottles. And people, you're saying leaving the plastic bottle at room temperature, people leave them in the sun. They don't even realize that they're heating up the bottle, or just throw them in the car on a hot day,
Right.
you know.
It
um
accelerates leaching even more. Ultraviolet,
right,
yeah, it's
right,
terrible.
right. And people also are still microwaving in plastic, and
Oh yeah.
that's a huge source. I mean, microwaving is bad to begin with. Even if you're not microwaving in plastic, it's bad because it does damage all the nutrients and changes the molecular structure of the food. But when you microwave in plastic, you're just eating plastic.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, and these things, they store up in your body too, so they're hard to get rid of. It's not like,
Right,
you're just peeing them out immediately when they're coming in. It's way beyond that because they store in your fat cells.
right.
So the average lifespan of a fat cell is a year and a half, which I talk about in my book because they've done studies with people that were exposed to the atomic bomb, and they find people that sometimes have fat cells that are 10 years old. So you can store these toxins for a super long time
Oh yeah.
if you're not getting rid of them, if you're not detoxing. Now, I like the sauna too. The sauna is
I
phenomenal
was
because you
just going to
sweat.
say that. Yeah, that's one of
Hmm.
the best ways to pull it out is using a
Hmm.
sauna and taking some detox supplements and drinking something like MCT oil in the sauna, because that good fat also helps
Hmm.
to pull
Displace.
to displace the toxins from the fat cells. So yeah, if you have access to a sauna, highly recommend it for everybody, really, because like you said, we're all exposed. And you can also get a a sauna in your house, an infrared sauna, if you have room for it. I actually have a sauna blanket. It's like a sleeping bag,
Oh yeah.
that
Yeah.
you crawl into. And it's wonderful. It feels so good. And just, do some sweating on a regular basis. And this is even more important if you're suffering from symptoms.
Right.
Really, any health issue would benefit from doing these detoxes. I'm intending to do a video just on different ways of detoxing because there's a high demand. A lot of people are asking for information about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's valuable. I mean, 10,000 years ago, it didn't matter. We didn't have all the toxins and all this stuff.
Right.
Nowadays, we're literally just soaking in this stuff all the time. And again, like people, just the personal care products. I mean, imagine how much stuff people are putting in their system with the fragrances and the perfumes and the deodorants and the lotions and the soaps. And most of that has some junk in it and some garbage. And you have to be pretty proactive to keep that stuff out of there. You have to really look for good companies, and it's not easy, so most people don't do it, and it needs to be done for your health long term. It's a long term thing. That's the other problem too, is like if you don't get a headache or something from it, people just think, oh, it's no big deal. So like they're fine because they're not getting an immediate health problem from these chemicals. They think it's fine, but then 10 years later, they've got a dozen health problems and they've all just added up into some giant problem. So
Right.
it ultimately saves you money, but it's hard to motivate people on long-term investments like that. But it's really important. People need to.
Basically, I tell people all the time, you don't just wake up one morning with cancer.
Mhm.
It
Right.
takes time to develop it. You don't just wake up one morning with a dysfunctional thyroid. These things are happening slowly over time, and maybe you're not symptomatic right away, and then one day you are symptomatic. So avoiding personal care products and cleaning products, household cleaning products, I talk about this a lot. And of course, food with chemicals in it. And it definitely is, it actually isn't that difficult to find clean products. So every time I do a video and talk about these topics, I'll put some resources there. Even on my website, I sell some clean products that are good quality, so people get very attached to their makeup, their mascara. They get attached to this brand, but they don't realize that is actually poisoning them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's again, it's frustrating because these chemicals should be illegal. And by the way, one of the things I did in my book was I compared Europe to America and just went down the list in terms of, parabens and this type, because paraben, by the way, is a broad category. It's found in a lot of plastics and fragrances, and so is phthalates. Like that's not just one thing to say phthalate. Phthalates include 100 different things. It's all kinds of different plastic chemicals. Same with parabens. Like for example, there's methyl paraben and propylparaben and butyl paraben. There's literally all these different. And so we just use the word paraben because it's easier than saying all these different subcategories of parabens. But gosh, Europe is so much more strict. I mean, all of these chemicals, like red 40 is another example that acts like estrogen, a chemical that acts like estrogen, red food dye.
Yep.
And if you use that in Europe, it's still legal in Europe. Unlike most of these chemicals, like atrazine is a herbicide, totally illegal in Europe. They don't even let you use it. In America, it's the second most used herbicide. But red 40 is still legal in Europe, but they make you put a warning label on your food if you use it. So you have to say this food may cause health damage or something like that. So nobody uses it. They use beet juice over there. So even the chemicals that aren't illegal in Europe are basically not found over there. And by the way, one of the other crazy things is China has stricter regulations on some of these estrogen chemicals than we have in America. So that should tell us everything, right? Because their regulations are terrible in terms of protecting the rivers and the environment and things like that.
It's just it's horrifying. It really is. And I think we're not the only country that uses glyphosate. I know it's illegal in Europe, right?
It's getting there, yeah. Oh yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of, even when it's illegal in a country to use it, these things travel. They end
Sure.
up
Up
in
in
the
the air,
ocean,
yeah.
they end up
Oh
in
yeah.
the atmosphere. So
Hmm.
people are still getting exposure regardless.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. I mean, that's where you have to sweat, right? Like even if you don't have a sauna, I think people need to exercise to the point where they're sweating and things like that.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's one of the benefits of exercise. It gets your blood moving, which does help your body detox, just more movement, you know.
Speed up your metabolism. Yeah, I have another suggestion about what you can do. Before I talk about it, I just want to give a shout out to my truth partner, HAT's Hardcore Awakened Truth Seekers movement. And this movement was inspired into creation amidst hyper political division in the last few years to get away from polarization and bring people together across the political spectrum to the truth and a sense of community that allows us to move forward. And they're making real strides in achieving this vision. And they have a wonderful Telegram channel. If you're on Telegram, I will put the link in my description. And they also have a website where you can buy some of their products. So I'm wearing my HAT's hoodie. It's keeping me nice and warm, drinking out of my HAT's mug, favorite mug. So if you put promo code Cori Stern, CORISTERN, if you're making a purchase, you'll get a surprise discount. So I was going to mention the other thing that I recommend that people do, which helps with detox, is lay on a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy mat. So that's a big mouthful of words. The abbreviation is PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy mat. So what it does is it's kind of like what people call grounding or earthing. It provides the frequency of an electromagnetic field that's therapeutic. And the mat that I have, you can set the specific frequency according to what you need. There's different protocols, and it helps with the cellular metabolism. So it helps to push nutrients into the cells and pull toxins out. It improves immune function. It improves microcirculation. So I actually have one of these in my office that I have my patients lay on for 20 minutes and just get a treatment. People swear by it. I have seen amazing improvements in all kinds of things. I had a patient with chronic dry eye. She didn't even tell me that she had dry eye, and she laid on the mat and her eyes started watering. Things like a patient who was suicidal got off the mat feeling like, oh, I don't know what was so bad before, and energy issues and all kinds of things. So, and it's just such an easy thing to do. You're just laying there like a dummy for 20, 30 minutes. I do sell that on my website also if you're interested. Have you ever tried one of those, Dr. J?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at conferences and stuff, I'll lay on those. It's pretty interesting. It's a wacky feeling. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Tony Robbins uses one
Mm.
regularly, and he talks a lot about it, in a lot of different podcasts and YouTube videos and things. Really interesting. He's got a better understanding of it than I do, unfortunately for me. But yeah, I've heard him speak on it. Really interesting.
Yeah. When I got the mat, I studied it so I could understand, I'm not a scientist, and didn't really know that much about frequency and wavelength, but I kind of get it. I get it. And I wrote just a little, a brief explanation of how it works. And, there's a lot of bad electromagnetic fields that we're being exposed to, which I think makes all the chemicals that we're exposed to even more toxic. So
Oh
this
yeah.
is one of the ways that you can, let's say, protect yourself from that. Yeah. So anything else, any other thoughts about how people can avoid poisoning themselves? I mean, besides the water, yes, the water is a huge thing, and the personal care products, and the microwaving in plastic. Is there any other common sources that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, it never ends once you start thinking about where the plastics are. Like a lot of people are brewing coffee in plastic coffee
Yes.
makers.
Right, the Keurigs, the little
Oh yeah, lots of plastic.
K-cups.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what I started doing for that was I make cold press. So I grind coffee beans, put them in room temperature water. They call it cold press, but I just use room temp. And then the next day I filter out the coffee grinds. I keep that in my fridge, but I like warm coffee, so I just cut it 50-50 with water, put it in the microwave or heat it up somehow. Uh, Whatever you want to do, it's nice and quick and easy. And then you've got hot coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes my wife uses French press too with the metal. You can buy
Mm-hmm.
a metal press machine without any plastics on it, very easy.
Yes.
So you can do that, or you can just heat the coffee in that same metal French press, right? It's made for the stove. So every day I like to do it hot, one of those ways, but I definitely don't use a plastic coffee maker anymore, and I used to every day for a lot of years. So it's just another source. It's like the last thing you need is just more sources coming at you from plastics because again, you're going to get some. I mean, there's going to be some in the air. You're going to get some. So there's no way to completely eliminate them.
Right.
So,
Control what you can. And
mhm.
people tend to get lazy, and no offense, but people just like, oh, it's too much work. It takes too long. I don't have time.
Right.
Like,
That's why I like cold press because
mhm,
it just takes a minute to heat it back up. It's not like,
right.
it's actually quicker than making coffee with a coffee machine most of the time. So,
Hmm.
and it tastes better. It's actually interesting. It tastes different. It tastes a little bit more mellow.
Hmm.
And it's kind of unique. So that's a big one. A lot of people drink soda too, or they've switched over to these calorie-free sodas that are like just sparkling water, but those are in
Yeah.
aluminum cans. The
Hmm.
aluminum is actually lined with plastic. Those
Hmm.
cans oftentimes have BPA or
Right.
BPS or whatever. So they say BPA free, but it's just as problematic. And so for that, once again, if people are just absolutely addicted to bubbling water, they can buy these like CO2 infusers that are all metal and you can use those now. So there's a ton of alternatives compared to just even a couple of years ago.
Right. Right.
Um,
And I just do want to mention, though, I have a video on my channel about water, and one of the I was a huge sparkling mineral water drinker, and my water guy said, the carbonation is acidic, it's carbolic acid, and really shouldn't be drinking it every day, which broke my heart, but I
yeah.
stopped.
Oh yeah,
I
that's acidic.
stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't drink it every day either. I mean, you can always offset acids with bases too. You can do certain strategies to offset some of that. But I mean, yeah, I don't feel particularly great if I have it all the time either. So,
Exactly. I had a patient tell me last night when she watched the video, she has cancer. So
mhm,
I really wanted her to be very careful. And she was drinking carbonated seltzer every day. And she told me she
mhm.
stopped, and she said, "Well, I actually noticed a difference." So yeah. So that's slightly off
Well,
topic, but
I mean,
important.
no, well, yeah. And plus, there's probably doing a lot of plastics with all that. But
Right.
the other big one that I haven't mentioned yet that is really, I think, pervasive is plastic clothing. People don't think their
Mm,
clothing is plastic, but man, a lot of it is. It's polyester, right? I mean, polyester
yep.
is made from petroleum, and it's
Yep.
the polyester is just an abbreviation for polyethylene terephthalate. It's even got the word phthalate added in there.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm especially picky about pillowcases and bed sheets and things because I don't want to sleep in plastic polyester
Right.
stuff all night. So I make sure it's cotton.
Yeah.
Um, and even at hotels, I bring my own pillowcase. I don't pack a pillow most of the time, but I'll bring pillowcases when I travel in my luggage and throw those on before I sleep. So I'm not just breathing in polyester all night because
That's
it's
really
in the air.
smart. Plus they wash it with chlorine and, all kinds
Hmm.
of chemicals in hotel rooms. But yeah, I mean, I recommend organic cotton sheets whenever possible. Organic mattresses are available. All bedding is organic bedding is available. But getting back to the clothing, um, if you think about it, right, let's say you're wearing exercise clothing made out of polyester, and you're sweating in it, and the heat is leaching the plastic into your body. And
Exactly.
It's a huge problem. I had a young man who was very symptomatic. He was like 10, 11 years old, and he had Crohn's disease, a very severe inflammatory bowel condition. And he wore these polyester track suits day and night. He slept in them. He never took them off. And, I realized that he was going to have to change the way he was dressing if he was ever going to improve.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and they've done studies on this stuff too. It's not like, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's even if they hadn't done the studies, it's like, well, you're wearing plastic, you're
Right.
sweating in the plastic, it's going to go both ways.
Yeah.
But they've even done the studies. It's crazy that nobody talks about it, but I think it's because the financial gain is so much bigger. I mean, cotton is definitely more expensive, petroleum is cheap. They can make these blankets, these like throw blankets and things for like $10,
Yeah.
and then you got to pay like 20 or 50 for cotton ones or whatever. So it's like they just lean in those plastic ones.
Cheap is not better for your health. That's all there is to it. When
Oh,
you, excuse me, when you buy products that are a little more expensive, you're investing in your health. And, that's what I choose to spend my money on. I never look at price tags when it comes to quality food, clothing, whatever products. I don't look at the price because I don't think there's anything more important than health, because if you don't have it, you might as well just give it all up.
oh yeah, yeah. You pay later, yeah, for the surgeries and all the other stuff.
Right. Or
Yeah, but
a
that's,
shorter life. Yeah.
oh yeah, well, both, right? I mean, yeah, it's sad to see these people that are fairly young just hobbling around with, walkers, or they're just so obese they
Yes.
can't even, they have to sit in a wheelchair or whatever all the time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
man, they could
And
be out hiking in the mountains.
you're seeing more and more, more and more.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's the main ones. I think that gives people a lot to do because there's a lot of
Right.
that stuff around,
Right.
and it's
Right.
not overwhelming. It's actually fairly simple. I think what people should do if they're a little bit overwhelmed is just ease into it.
Right.
It's like next time you buy Tupperware, get glass, and then
Right.
get rid of those plastic ones. Don't necessarily go out and overhaul everything. Although I'm a fan of doing that too. I think if you can, overhaul everything. That's the best thing to do. Get it out quick. But if you have
Most
to, go
people
slow.
can't do it. Yeah. Most people, I tell them, when you're done with that um, poison toxic shampoo,
Hmm.
buy this one instead and just transition,
Hmm.
start to develop awareness. Really is the first step, and that's why we do what we do, right? To help with
Oh
that,
yeah. Yeah.
developing awareness. Yeah. All right. Well, this was great. I really wanted to tackle this topic for a long time, so I'm so happy that you came on to the show. Folks, if you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, don't forget to do that. And if you liked the video, if it was helpful, click like, because it'll help other people find it. And most importantly, share this with anyone that you think would benefit from this information. And we'll put Dr. J's links to his YouTube channel in the description so you can follow him. He has a lot of great videos on his channel as well. And maybe we can have you back, Doc. I would love that.
Thank you. Yep. Let's see it. Drop a comment and let us know if you want me
Yeah.
back
Yeah. Okay.
after hearing all this scary stuff about plastics. Yeah.
It's what I talk about on all my videos. We take the scary stuff and we solve the problems with it, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for giving up your time, and we'll see you again soon.
Yep. All right.